Welcome to this explainer. You know, for way too long, our default reaction to teenagers using substances has been totally rooted in moral panic and heavy blame. We tend to throw around words like lazy, irresponsible, or even deviant. But today, we're flipping the script. We're trading in all that judgment for a highly empathetic developmental roadmap. We're going to dive right into the real psychological, social, and ecological pathways that lead a young person to use substances, and, most importantly, how we can actually practically support them.
To really ground our understanding today, I want to introduce you to Roger. Roger is a 15-year-old kid who drops this exact statement during a routine wellness visit. His mother brought him in, and she is expressing this deep, palpable panic over his sudden social withdrawal, big changes in his appetite, and just a general, across-the-board lack of motivation. And when he's asked about his cannabis use, Roger doesn't apologize, he doesn't act guilty, he doesn't even try to hide it. He just calmly defends it as an absolute, undeniable necessity just to get through his day. So think about your immediate reaction to Roger's defense for a second. Honestly, how would you respond to that? Are you tempted to just immediately label him as a bad kid who's making terrible choices? Or maybe you want to jump straight to a clinical diagnosis of addiction? Look, it's a completely natural reflex. But as we're going to see, jumping to those conclusions right out of the gate might actually cost us our only real chance to truly help him. Let's look a little closer at Roger's situation. We know he's 15, we know he uses Lomert to relax, and he totally waves away his memory issues because, frankly, he thinks school is incredibly boring, which, let's be honest, is a sentiment a lot of us can probably relate to. But notice what we don't know here. We have literally no idea about his sleep quality, his baseline mood, or if he's experienced any underlying trauma. And because of those blind spots, we absolutely have to avoid premature closure. We just can't lock into a single explanation yet. We need to start asking better, curiosity-driven questions. To do that, we really need a fundamental paradigm shift. The absolute most crucial point here is moving away from asking what's wrong with them and instead asking what does this behavior actually do for the adolescent. To truly help Roger, we have to adopt a mindset of empathetic inquiry. We really need to understand that while a teenager might be experiencing risk, they are definitely not defined as a risk.
Okay, before we go any further, we do need to draw a hard line on our terminology. Mere experimentation or risky use is fundamentally different from a substance use disorder. A disorder is a severe clinical condition. It's marked by major impairment, tolerance, withdrawal, and just a total loss of control. What we want to do is catch the behavior early on the continuum, right when the risk is just starting to accumulate, rather than waiting for a severe, full-blown disorder to take root.
Diagnosing the actual root cause early on is tricky, and that's thanks to a brilliant psychological concept called Equifinality. Imagine a whole bunch of different roadmaps that all end up at the exact same destination. That's Equifinality in a nutshell. 4 different teens might develop the exact same problematic drinking habit for completely different reasons. One might be drinking to soothe severe anxiety, another might be drinking desperately just to fit in with peers, a third might be driven by pure impulsivity, and a fourth might be reacting to major family instability. You absolutely cannot use a one-size-fits-all solution if they all took totally different roads to get to that exact same destination. On the flip side of that, we have multifinality. This shows us that a shared starting point, say family instability, doesn't guarantee a specific negative future. One teen in that environment might develop anxiety, sure, but another might become a super high-achieving caretaker for their siblings, and another might turn to substances. This is a massive warning against treating risk markers as some kind of fixed destiny. When we treat a kid's background like it's a predetermined sentence, it causes adults to basically give up on or prejudge a child before they even have a chance to grow.
Now, these outcomes don't just happen overnight. They're the result of what we call developmental cascades. Think of it like a giant ecological snowball effect. For example, a teen struggles with emotion regulation, right? That leads to a harsh school punishment. That punishment triggers peer rejection. Now, feeling completely isolated and rejected by their usual friends, that teen goes and seeks sanctuary with a substance-using peer group. One domain directly alters the probability of the next, cascading all the way down into the behavior we ultimately see on the surface.
So, how do we untangle this mystery? Well, developmental science gives us 4 distinct but definitely overlapping pathways to organize our reasoning: the externalizing, internalizing, repeated use, and contextual pathways. Let's break these down so we can pinpoint exactly where risk might be accumulating for a young person and figure out the exact psychological mechanics at play. First up, the externalizing pathway.
This involves teens who really struggle with behavioral disinhibition and impulsivity. For them, substance use might serve as an immediate thrill, a really loud show of defiance, or just a way to claim some social status. This happens especially when institutions, like their school or their community, inadvertently push them away by constantly labeling them as a troublemaker. When the conventional system totally rejects them, well, they go find their reward and their identity somewhere else.
Meanwhile, the internalizing pathway is often completely quiet and hidden from view. This is the adolescent who's using substances to self-medicate against anxiety, trauma, sleep deprivation, or even profound shame. They aren't the ones acting out in class. They are just desperately trying to numb an overwhelming internal distress. If we ignore or dismiss the real relief they're getting from the substance, we instantly lose all our credibility with them.
Over time, the repeated use pathway kicks in. This one is all about learning and habit at a fundamental neurological level. Through sheer repetition, a young person's world begins to functionally narrow. The brain actually physically adapts to rely on the substance, hijacking their reward system until that substance literally becomes the only reliable way they know how to sleep or relax or socialize. Their brain chemistry and their daily routines adapt entirely around securing and using it.
And wrapping around all of these is the contextual pathway. This is the broader ecosystem. We're talking family dynamics, school climate, retail availability, and deep systemic inequities. Context isn't just some background variable. It totally dictates what choices are actually realistically available to the teen. For instance, if a kid lives in an area with a huge retail availability of substances, but absolutely zero accessible after-school programs, their realistic choices for recreation and socialization are heavily restricted right from the start.
Which brings us to a really powerful tool for pulling this all together, the Ecological Identity Model, or EIM for short. This model goes way beyond just checking off a laundry list of risk factors. Instead, it asks a really profound question. How does an adolescent interpret their environment to form their own identity? It looks at what environments tell a kid about who belongs, who is actually valued, and exactly how they internalize those messages.
Let's see how this builds into a brilliant 6-step reasoning sequence. Walk through a quick micro-scenario with me. Step 1 is the ecological condition. Let's say it's a highly competitive school environment. Step 2 is identity appraisal. The teen realizes they aren't getting top grades, so they appraise their identity as a failure in that system. Step 3 is regulatory signals. Feeling like a failure triggers intense anxiety and stress signals in their brain. Step 4 brings in cost and cross-pressure. They feel the pressure to succeed from their parents, but the social cost of studying and failing anyway is just way too high. Step 5 is calibration and behavior. To cope with this cross-pressure, they calibrate by skipping class and smoking weed with friends just to regain a sense of control and belonging. And finally, Step 6 is ecological feedback. The school suspends them. That suspension feeds right back into Step 1, changing the environmental conditions and worsening the kid's self-appraisal for the next cycle. It's an incredibly vicious ongoing loop.
All right, let's bring this all back to Roger. We have the tools now, and we are going to unlock this mystery. We're going to use this new EIM framework to solve the puzzle of how to actually help him, instead of just trying to forcefully take away his coping mechanism and leaving him with absolutely nothing to fall back on. When we analyze Roger's ecology through these specific pathways, things become so much clearer. He is showing really strong signs of an internalizing issue, using by himself just to self-medicate and relax. We see that repeated use pathway forming because his brain is actively adapting. I mean, he claims he simply cannot function without it. Contextually, he's totally disconnected from his identity at school, and he's facing really tense family dynamics at home. What we're looking at is a teenager experiencing deep, profound cross-pressures, caught entirely between his fundamental need for internal relief and his natural, developing need for autonomy. Knowing all of this, our whole approach has to change. Instead of asking a judgmental question like, "Why are you doing this bad thing?" we need to shift our language entirely. The absolute most effective stance is to pause, step back, and ask Roger something like, "Walk me through the last time you used, and what exactly it helps you with." Or, "What happens when you don't use?" We have to identify the exact function the substance is serving in his life so we can help him find a healthier replacement for it.
By identifying that function, we can match Roger with the exact right prevention strategies. Prevention actually happens at 3 distinct levels. Universal programs intended for everyone, like school-wide wellness initiatives. Selective interventions designed for groups at an elevated risk, like providing targeted family support, and indicated strategies specifically for individuals who are already showing early signs of use, like direct coping treatments. For Roger, he needs a combination of selective and indicated interventions that specifically target his underlying need for relief and authentic human connection.
To make that happen, we have to build what's called a minimum viable protective ecology for him. Because, let's be real, a goal without a supportive ecology is really just a wish. Based on his EIM profile, this specific ecology works for Roger because it addresses the actual root causes. We need to surround him with alternative routines for sleep to break that repeated use habit. We absolutely must help his parents shift from panic to calm boundary setting to relieve that contextual cross-pressure. And we need to provide credible, engaging opportunities for him to find belonging at school, so he doesn't feel like he has to rely on substances just to feel okay.
Ultimately, to create lasting change, we have to leave the moral panic behind us. We really have to ask ourselves, what must change in this adolescence ecology so that healthy choices are not just known, but practically, socially, and psychologically survivable? So the next time you see a teen struggling, ask yourself, are you going to be a source of judgment, or are you going to be a protective part of their ecology?